All right, everything's recording. Well, let's go. All right, welcome everybody. This is I'm not even sure what episode of the solo cast or the VonDubCast what this is going to be. What this is just a wrap up. It's Sunday, June 20th right now, and June 21st of 2020 was the first day that I released the podcast and kind of let everybody know. Of course, that journey started a couple months before that time, but that was the time that I brought it to the world, and I finally matched what I knew inside for a long time with the outside world of just letting everyone know that this is something I wanted to chase and starting to build, because at the start, it was so much harder to answer the question of what is your podcast about and what is it going to be. And I'm hoping that I can take you guys for a journey through my thought process on why I wanted to start it, what went into it, all the way through the episodes, take you through my mindset and kind of how these episodes came together, what I thought of them, what was going through my head, what kind of things in life, and maybe highlight some of my favorite episodes along and what I learned from them, and just kind of do a year in review. And hopefully if you guys listen to this, you might find a couple episodes that you missed along the way that you might want to go back to that maybe didn't hook you, but you didn't get a real good sell on them in the first place. You maybe just saw the Instagram post and didn't really catch you, but maybe hearing me talk about it will bring a little bit further in. So that's kind of what I wanted to do today. I'm sure I'll go all over the place. I'm sure some other topics will pop up, and I will not just talk about the podcast, but we'll see where it goes. So yeah, I just kind of want to start off all the way back. I think it was April of 2020. Pandemic was in full swing, living by myself, very much in a dark place, and my mental health was in a dark place. I wasn't very happy at work, wasn't being fulfilled the same way. Really wanted to make a change, was very frustrated with the lack of conversation and the shutting down of conversations around a lot of things, around politics, around the pandemic, around so many of these things. And I just wanted to throw my hat in the ring, and I knew I had to do it. And actually through meditation, I've told the story a million times on the podcast, you'll find it somewhere, of just kind of how that came to fruition, and that decision that I made in that moment, that I'm going to chase this and I'm going to order the equipment, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And it was scary. And I only told a couple people. I think the first person I told was maybe my sister. I already had the stuff ordered. I think I told Courtney. I said, I'm starting a podcast. And I think she was going through some stuff, because I think at that point it was kind of becoming clear that the wedding that she had planned and was looking forward to so much was going to have to change around that time, and she was pretty disappointed. And I just thought, well, I'm going to tell somebody anyways, and Courtney's probably one of the first people, so I just kind of let her in on it. And she, for a couple of weeks, she might have been the only one that knew about it, and helped me bounce a few ideas off of, and she was so supportive, and that really helped to have at least one person right off the bat, say, no, I really think you can do this. I think, and she's always believed in me. Going back to a conversation me and Courtney had years before this, and I think I've discussed this on the podcast too. We were out running in Edmonton one day in the River Valley, and she just said, like, if you could do anything, what would you do? And I think at the time I said, I think I'd stream video games. It's just, I could do something I love. I could make money at it and just have fun and enjoy getting up every day and what I do. And I don't know if I had fully fallen into podcasting, but it's the same extension of the same thing. The same reason I said that then is what I would say now for why I want to do the podcast and streaming and all these things, but just essentially to be able to live my life how I determine it. And that's why it's special. And I told a few other people, and once the equipment started to arrive, I started to figure it out. I started watching some YouTube videos, found Buzzsprout, which is the hosting service, went through that whole shindig of kind of what it was going to look like. And then I had the mics, I had everything, and I was, ready to rock and roll. I was going to record some episodes. So the first one I did, I set up a table in the basement of my parents' new place in Edmonton, brought my sister down, and we had this amazing conversation. It was the first one, the pilot episode. And it was really fun, and we really were open and vulnerable. And I had that taste of, hey, I could do this forever. I had so much fun for those 3 hours or whatever we did. Time stopped, and it was so amazing. And then after that, I got home from that weekend, and I needed to figure out how to do an online option, because through the pandemic, right, this is like at least June or earlier of 2020. So like right in the middle of everything, I'm going to have a Zoom aspect to it. Even though I'd heard all these podcasts I'd listened to, I'd heard so much of them say, you can't do a Zoom interview. It's just not the same. It doesn't have the same magic as being in person. So I was definitely inundated with that information, but I thought, I'm going to have to figure it out. And that's a skill I want to have. I want to be able to interview people over the computer because that's not going away, but I also want to do in person, and I'll decide for myself what that difference is. And if eventually I get to that point, and maybe if the pandemic pisses off, I might put a rule in place where I only do Zoom interviews, if it really calls for it. Right. And that might happen. But anyways, I didn't even know how to do it. So I found this software, and I recorded another episode with Liam, and I can't remember what we talked about. We talked about some video games, some stuff, have the wedding move. Sorry, Liam is my sister's fiance. And that one was good. And then I did a third interview with Courtney, and she kind of turned the tables on me and interviewed me. And that was a fun one to do as well. So then I did those three, and I still hadn't, and at this point I was recording these episodes and I hadn't released them, right? This is all prior to June 21st, because I had 5 episodes when I released. So then I also, I just in conversation with Kyle Cuggy, who has been on the podcast twice since, and he was one of those 5, just let him know that I was starting this podcast, and like if he would be one of those people that would, take a risk on it. Like he gave me his time and did the podcast with me before anybody even knew I had a podcast, right? And same with Bill Pickering, who was episode 5, and those are the 5 I started with before going on to more. So I had all those in the can, but I'd never edited any of them. So I'd recorded all these, and that was so much fun. I was like, oh man, I love this stuff, but I didn't know what all went into it. So I had 5 episodes recorded. I'd done nothing with them. I just had the audio. So then I go on a trip to Penticton in June, around June 21st, and I bring all my equipment, and I, put it all into GarageBand, and had to do some editing. And oh no, it was before I left for Penticton. Yeah. I was trying to get a bunch ready for before we went to Penticton. But that first episode I recorded with Courtney in the basement, I had the mics turned up too much. So when I was talking, it was picking up on her mic. When she was talking, it was picking up on my mic. So I had to sit there painstakingly go through and edit out every time she's talking. I had to edit out like the chunks on my side without letting it all get disconnected and stuff. And it took hours and hours. And I sat at home doing it for probably 2 hours one night at least. And I lost it all. I accidentally did something I didn't save, or I don't know what I did, and I lost all of it, and I was devastated. Episode 1, like, is this what it's going to be like? Am I going to have to do like 9 hours of editing on every episode? And I was just crushed. But I did it. I jumped back into it. I got better at it. I learned a lot of tips and tricks, and it turned out that, I could figure some of these things out so that I don't have to do so much editing. And then finding the ones that are online that have a little less editing, because there's just less things that can go wrong when it's you in a room recording with nothing else and another person in the room. The files come through a little clearer. But that was a scary time. I didn't know what was going to go into it. I didn't know if this was going to be too much, right? Like if it's 8 hours per episode of editing, like, like sitting here going out tomorrow, if I put an episode out tomorrow, or just not even thinking about tomorrow, I will have 75 episodes released. I have released 75. Sitting here today, I've released 75 episodes in this first year before tomorrow. And recorded, I've had over 80. And I don't think, from what I would have known at that time, if it would have gone that way, I wouldn't have been able to do that, right? And that was what was running through my head of like, that's what I accomplished sitting here today is what I was hoping to accomplish, I think. But in that moment, I didn't think I was going to be able to accomplish that. I thought I was really worried and I was going to have to change it. But it meant so much to me. I was like, if this is what it's going to have to be. And to me, that was never, at any of those times, it was never, am I going to quit this? It was more, oh man, this is going to be so much more than I have. I might not be able to do it exactly as I plan. I might have to take a lot of things out of my life to make sure that I have 8 hours a week. And that's what I was thinking. And it was a lot scarier when I thought I was going to have to make those decisions. But even still at that moment, I didn't think of quitting. I just thought, oh man, there's going to be a lot of changes. And, my parents are probably going to be very happy with me because I'm probably going to have to drop a lot of things to make this dream come true. And it turned out that I found that balance point. Well, as you'll hear as I go through this, I, found that balance and lost that balance many times. But that was kind of how I was feeling. And I got the first 3 edited, right? The one with the 2 with Courtney and 1 with Liam, and had them ready to go out. And had them all set up in Buzzsprout. And all I needed to do was pull the trigger of just make them go live. And I sat there and I was thinking about doing it on the 21st of June, and I was going to do it that morning, and I chickened out, and I was going to do it later. And then we went out on the boat, and it was the whole family, me, my girlfriend, my parents, my sister, and her fiance. And we're all out there, and, just sitting there in the sun in my favorite place on earth on Skaha Lake in Penticton, and decided, I'm gonna pull the trigger. I'm gonna hit the button. And I told the whole man, I said, hey, I'm making it live. I'm sending it right now. And I sent it and made the Instagram announcements and all that, and kind of put it out to the world that this is what I'm doing. And then I went up at the front of the boat and just sat there and just meditated for 20 minutes and just tried to clear my brain, and just knowing that this is a huge moment. This is a seminal moment in my entire life. I'm going to look back on this. Well, at that moment, it had the chance to be. And to me, the only thing that would make that either a seminal moment or just, a flash in the pan of something that wasn't really, is what I put into it from there. And I had to decide, and I had to put intention that I'm marking this moment. I'm taking this silence to mark this as a big moment in my life, to give it the right intention and to set it off on that path. And from there, it was off to the races. And, and that's when it all becomes real. And now you have to keep following up, right? Like you always hear, consistency. You can't miss a week. You need to have an episode every week for those people on that Monday. And I can say a year later, I haven't missed a week. And, if you think about 52 weeks in a year, and I have released 75 episodes, I was more than an episode a week. And I'm proud of that. And it's not easy. And it's so much fun, but I got there. So, then I had the 5 episodes. I did one with Kyle. That was fun. Did one with Bill. Still was still kind of finding my feet. I think I was a little bit maybe too, I don't know. I think at the very start, I wasn't speaking as truly from my voice. It was more so of kind of copying those that had come before me and really trying to be one version. I was trying to be the podcasting version of myself, right? Of who I thought that should be, and very intellectual and all this stuff, and was maybe not letting all the different sides of my more weird sides and my more funny side, where I feel like I'm much more natural on this and I don't think about the mic as much. But you can definitely tell in those first couple. So I did one with my buddy Bill, who we went to school with, who was very monumental and kind of changing my path along the way when I was in university. Did one with Fraser Oliver. He was episode number 6, one of my best friends ever. He's been on a couple times. Then I had Simon Vanass, another one of my good friends. And then, and these are all online, by the way. So I'd only done the one episode in person with my sister, and then I'm doing them through Zoom, and they're having different levels of success, right? Like it's definitely a noticeable difference doing it online versus doing it in person. And it's definitely depends on the person, right? Like, so I did one with Cuggy, and he was awesome, and it went really well. And I was having a lot of confidence in the Zoom format. Then I did one with Fraser or with Bill, and it was all right. It was a bit tough. And I felt like what I was finding was happening was, for some reason over Zoom, it was kind of putting this myopic view of one thing that we were discussing, right? Like I felt like me and a lot of those episodes were very one tone, because it didn't allow the freedom of being in front of someone. It allows you kind of to show more of your personality, go off the beaten tracks and a little bit, and show a little bit more well-roundedness. But it felt like we were kind of just hitting the same tones with those ones. And I was a little bit worried. And then did one with Iman Lau, and that one was really special for me because she came on and talked about Hong Kong and fighting for rights and that kind of thing. And that really got to bring out a different side of me that I was very excited to show. And just a different type of podcast experience. So I was excited to bring that one forward. And that was a really big moment. And I'm really proud of that one to this day. And then the next one, Chad Paulson, number 9. So I am 8 episodes in now, right? The first 5 I recorded. The next ones I'm coming in. I'm maybe a month or so into this. Actually, I should pull this up on my phone so I can see the actual dates of when these podcasts are coming out, because I think that might help me tell the story a little bit better, maybe even, because I'll be able to see how much time has gone by since starting it. So that was episode 8 with Iman was July 17th, so just about a month. So then episode 9 with Chad Paulson. And Chad Paulson is a local guy from Slave Lake. Him and a buddy decided when the economy crashed, oil went down in the shitter, one of the many times it has over the years, that they were going to make a change, and they wanted to start a brewery. And they started Dog Island Brewing in Slave Lake, which has just become a cultural icon. And it's just a huge part of the community that raised me and made me who I am, is now giving back to that community and providing something that was, I don't think we realized it, but sorely missed in town, and they're filling that niche amazingly. And for whatever reason, just the dynamic of Chad being such a laid back guy. It was the first time on the podcast that episode 9, I shouldn't say that, not the first time, because I think with me and my sister, but I expected, the relationship with me and my sister, we were in that flow that I'm about to talk about. But because Chad was so laid back and chill, he allowed me to take the conversation wherever we wanted. When we were talking about the brewery, we were talking about when I wanted to go off my weird hippie tangents of life and the universe and kind of how it all draws together, and see kind of the weirder common threads behind all this, the more day-to-day events. He let me do it, and he added his stuff when he could, and backed off. And it was just, he was a perfect guest to allow me to get to a level that I figured going into it. I wouldn't have jumped off the ship if I didn't think I could get there, but I was only feeling little pieces of it. And I felt like that was the first episode that I actually was in it, and I came out of it, and I'm running around the house, and I just had this feeling, like, just like this fire, like I'm like a kid, like just so much excitement, just like, yes, that was it. Right. And that'd be one, like, I'm excited to go through this list because I want to point back to them, like, if people miss them or don't know, or maybe listen to them but didn't understand the I want to say like the cultural importance, but like just the personal cultural importance, the culture to the podcast cultural importance, right? To like what this podcast has become over that year. Like these are big landmarks in my journey. And I think that might be exciting for you guys if you haven't listened to them, or if maybe you're finding this 10 years from now and you're going back to see what I was like after my first year, and you want to maybe check out in this first 75 episodes, which ones are worth your time to go back to. Because I'm sure if it's 10 years from now, if my podcasting is immensely better and I'm on to bigger and better things and doing things really cool. But Chad was definitely one of those episodes, and I was so happy that I got to do it. And I'm still really proud. I'm proud of every one of these episodes in their own ways, but that was one where I feel like, okay, I can do this. We are hitting those high marks. Like, if I would want to listen, if I heard this podcast, I would want to listen and I would be engaged. And then the next one I had on was my buddy Kyle Rosento. Me and him were thick as thieves in our second year university, and he never ended up coming back for third year or fourth year. So we kind of went on very different paths, and still very close friends. And we catch up from time to time. We actually just caught up this week and played a couple games of League of Legends and seen what we're up to. But that was a really fun episode. Again, with the Zoom delay, it wasn't. And this is the thing. I'm such a hard marker. Like I'm so hard on myself that all these episodes were amazing, but just certain ones hit that expectation. I just have such high expectations that I feel like I'm maybe not giving the credit. I feel bad now that I give Chad such a glowing review. I feel like now I'm being mean to the other ones, but by no means do I mean that. And Kyle will be on a million times in the future. And this is what I feel. So like, maybe this will be a better way I can say it. So guys like Kyle Cuggs and who's episode 4, Bill Pickering, episode 5, episode 6, Fraser Oliver, episode 7, Simon, right? Like, and then Iman and Chad, I knew a little bit less, but like Kyle, Bill, Fraser, and Simon, they're all my really close friends, and I know them so well. And there's very specific things that I want to be brought out on the podcast to show you guys what I see in them. And I feel like over Zoom, it's really hard to do that. And I'm so excited to get like that specific list. And there'll probably be more of people that fall into that category in front of me, so I can really pull that out and let you guys see deeper who they are, right? But then there's one, so then that wasn't really more the goal. I was more wanted to make sure the information that she had and her worldview on Hong Kong, and that needed to be brought forward. That was more important. That was what I was trying to highlight, and we did, right? And with Chad, I didn't really know what I was trying to highlight. I just kind of went into it with a blank slate, which maybe is a lesson. Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe there's more to it there of just, like, I wanted to talk about brewing and I was curious, and I just kind of followed my genuine curiosity, and he was so open that he what's the word? He put up with me at every step along the way. Oh, what is the word? I hate not finding the word for whatever reason. And when there's a specific word that matches up with exactly what I'm trying to say and I can't find it, it bugs me. Like, not flattered. The flattered is closer to what I'm going to. Anyways, I digress. He allowed me to go places, and it was lots of fun. And then I got back into Kyle, where it felt again where it was a great episode. I really liked what we talked about. And we talked about some really amazing things and went deep, but I didn't really get to the full idea of what I wanted to bring forward with Kyle. And then the next episode was with Erica Wolf, who Erica is an amazing person. She's so smart. She has such strong values, and I really appreciate that. And I was so excited to get her on. I was so happy that she gave me her time. And that was one of the conversations. That was the first one maybe of this where I felt like I was getting pushed, and I had to really dig into my ideas and balance them. And I was so excited for that, because that's one of my favorite parts of podcasts, is hearing these people that I really look up to and I am very familiar with be pushed and have their ideas that I've heard them say before be tested in a way that I've never heard them have to be tested before. And that was really fun for me. And I'm really excited to get Erica back on the podcast. And that brings us to episode 12, which is one of those huge moments for the podcast. So if we back up to, it was probably around the time, maybe a week or two after I'd first released, maybe around the time where I was recording ones with Fraser and Simon. And one of the people I work with came to me one day at work and just said, "Hey, I started listening to your podcast. I really enjoy it. Thank you so much." Or I just said like, "Thank you so much. That means so much to me." And she said, "And actually, I also heard this podcast I really listened to, had this guy named David Akinnon on, and he's very fascinating. He's done all this stuff, and you mentioned a few things, and now is working in Africa. And not only did I think he'd be good for your podcast, but I reached out to him, said that, hey, I know a guy that has a podcast, and you mentioned that you might be willing to come on more podcasts and spread the message you're trying to spread," and actually got his email for me, which was such another one of those moments of just seeing just something you never expect coming into your life and just saying like, here's something on a silver platter that means so much to you. And I've gone and already done this work, right? And I mean, you could play the semantics of what kind of work that is. You probably, just one DM, "Hey, would you do this?" and got an email for me, right? Like maybe not the amount of work that is, but the amount of meaning behind that and what that meant to me was so huge, right? And it was really impactful. And I was really excited. And then, and it was a big moment because it was also the first person that I don't know. And that's a big piece of this podcast. If I want to get good, I'm going to have to get skilled at interviewing someone I don't really know or that doesn't know me, and to find that and to be able to bring stuff out of them. And I started doing research into what David has done. And this is one of those episodes where if people miss this episode with David Akinnon, you got to go back and listen to it. This is one of my personal favorites. David's family grew up in Venezuela. They escaped after his parents got kidnapped, or kids got kidnapped. And there was a kidnapping. They had to escape, came to America, had this amazing drive, grew up Jewish, and we talked about what that meant. And I was very thankful for him to allow me to ask some of the questions I had about the faith and how that built into life and values and what he's doing today. And just to hear his story, like he worked at Google, he worked on Wall Street, he worked all over these places. He did all these things. He, in high school, sent like 6,000 pairs of shoes to Africa to help people, like just has done TED Talks, like just such an amazing guy. And I'd done so much research for this, and I was so excited for it, and it went so well, and I enjoyed the conversation. It was so meaningful to me. Like that conversation, I felt like what I learned about myself and I don't know, just about life, just in that conversation with somebody like that for the first time. And I feel like I've reached that level again on many podcasts since, but that was the first time of like feeling it of just, man, this is here. Like I can do this. This is real. And it was such an amazing time and such an amazing conversation. And it was also, it was the first time I did one during work hours, and I hated this because I have such a complex of guilt all the time, right? Since I started this podcast of, am I giving enough to work and all this stuff, and am I balancing it right? And are people mad at me because I'm doing too much of one thing? And anywho, that will come back up in the story once we get closer to the end of it. But it was really fun to do. And the only negative of it was I had to do it during work hours because, he's in Namibia, Africa, bit of a time change. So it's nighttime there, early morning, midday here. Anyways, I had to come during work and record the episode. So the whole time we're recording, it was so amazing. But a piece of me is, what's going on at work? What's going on at work? Is my phone blowing up? Is there a truck in the ditch? Is there fuel everywhere? Like what's going on? Like a little bit PTSD of some other stuff. Anyway, but I was so worried to get back to work, and I was so thankful that he gave me all these hours because we did quite a long interview. And I knew he wanted to get to bed, and he hadn't eaten and all this stuff, that he says to me, do I need to leave the page open because it says it's still downloading? And I'd done a couple before, and I was getting cocky. This is episode 12 at the time that I was recording. So I was thinking, no, it's fine. Just shut it down. Like it saves it. It says it's good on my side. And he goes, are you sure? It's giving me an error warning. Like, are you sure I want to do this? I say, yeah, it's fine. So he disconnects, and I run off to work, and I just had a weird feeling of, that doesn't seem right. So the rest of the day at work, I just had this weird feeling. So I got home, I ran straight in here, checked it right away, and it didn't save his side of it. Oh, I was devastated, guys. Like, I can't even tell you, my stomach dropped out. And meanwhile, it's middle of the night in Namibia. He's sleeping. And I just had to write up this. I could probably find it for you guys. This just head hung low, embarrassed email of just, thank you so much for your opportunity. I had so much of fun on this podcast. I fucked up. It didn't record. I'm trying to fix it. But if I can't find this, I'm so sorry. Like, I can't believe I wasted your time like that. It was so amazing, and how genuine you were and everything you gave on that podcast for me to lose it like that. It's so unprofessional, and this isn't me. And I've learned so much, and I'll never let this happen again. It was just the worst. Like, that night, that was a low night. That was not fun. And I obviously the program that I was using at the time, it was called Zencaster, and I emailed them, but their support didn't get back to me till the morning. So I was hoping without hope that I could find it. And but I had to go to bed, and I wanted to send that message out because I knew he'd wake up before. So I woke up in the morning with an amazing message back of just, hey, don't worry about it. Let me know if there's anything I can do from my side. Maybe it's saved on my side. But you know what, even if it didn't, you know, mistakes happen. He was so nice about it. And he said, you know, don't beat yourself up. This type of thing happens. You're going to learn from it. And was, you know, made me feel so much better. And got an email back that morning from Zencaster saying, yeah, no problem. There's we have this way of getting it back. He just has to go in to reopen the file, and there's a way we can re-download it on his end, and it ended up working out. And it was so thankful. But that moment was huge of just that you get cocky and you're going to get bit by it. Right. And did I learn a lot on that one. But that was one of those episodes where I really hold it highly, and it meant a lot to me for so many reasons. The next episode was Sean Olalakin. Sean is really fun guy. Really enjoyed him. He was another Listerite that was there and started an amazing company where he took these cookies that his mom used to make, and his relationship with his mom is quite special. And the meaning behind the company, it's not just the product and how he sells and stuff, which I have a lot of, I look up to him a lot with how he does it, and not how serious he takes. I mean, it also is serious, but that's not the right word. It's how, I don't know. It's like he takes his values where you can tell he's a very valued person, but he puts that through in everything he does, and you can see it through the social media, and you can see it through everything he does with that company. I just really look up to it. And I got to get Sean back on the podcast here. This is another good reason to do this, is to check back with these people and see where they are now. But I definitely need Sean back on. So we did an awesome episode with him just about business and doing stuff on your own and being an entrepreneur. I learned a ton from that episode. That was a really good one. The next episode was number 14 with Jamie Coots, who I've been on his podcast since, the fire chief in Slave Lake during the fire. That was another one where literally goosebumps the entire episode of just, you know, like going back and putting yourself in those shoes of that time and talking with it. And I've had people on since my friends that also went through it, and just having the podcast to bring you back to those moments and to tell some of these older stories. It's amazing how visceral the reaction is and how much you can be brought back into that moment. So if there's anybody from Slave Lake or wants to see what that moment was like, that's an amazing episode to check out. Then episode 15 was with a teacher from California named Will Roosh. He also has a podcast, and he is very much on the side of free speech and is an interesting cat. And this was my attempt to go down a path with the podcast that I'd yet to be able to do with any of the guests, but that I was very passionate about, and probably has come out very much as of late, now that I've gotten more familiar with myself and in the podcast, this space of what it was of kind of pushing back against the censorship and the ridiculousness of academia, and kind of pushing back and just this stranglehold on truth that is happening in the world. And that was kind of my first push. And unfortunately, he only going into it, I was really excited. I had like a list of questions this long. Another one of these guys that I'd never met before, so I did prep work out the ass. Like for David Akinnon, I probably did like 15 hours of research, right? Like watched documentaries, watched his TED Talks, read all his blogs. Like I went to the ends of the earth to make sure I was ready for that. And same with Will Roosh. And we ended up only doing he's a busy guy. He's got kids. He's a teacher, right? He had shit to do. So we only did less than an hour. And it was like, we just got to the start of this. And it was still an amazing episode. And within that hour we did, but again, probably a guy I had to have on. But that was a good learning lesson to me of just not getting too caught up. Don't maybe make sure you know what you got before you go dumping 15 hours of research. And maybe you get to like two out of the 30 questions because of something like that. Right. And that was a good learning one. Then, and these are all online, by the way, almost purely, right? And I feel like I'm getting my feet behind me, right? It was that tough switch of doing one in person for the very first one and then going to Zoom from there, because it is such a more difficult endeavor to make this happen with a delay of Zoom or whatever program you're using, right? It's a completely different game. Both good. And I feel like when I do an in-person, now that I have a little bit of experience in this, if I do an in-person one and then it's amazing. Every in-person one I've done has been out of this world, but then I go do, 5 or 6 Zoom interviews and then go back to another in-person. I can feel that maybe it's not one-to-one practice, but they all serve each other, right? And doing these Zoom ones is not worthless. It makes me a better interviewer when I do get in front of people, and that's been a fun experience to learn, because I didn't know going into it how those two things would relate. They might be so different that they do not serve each other at all. And I could do 100 Zoom interviews, and when I start doing in person again, I'd be at the step 1, which thankfully that's not the case, and they are very applicable. But just to kind of prime me for some episodes that are coming. So the next one I did with Yelena, one of my good friends. She's been on a couple times. Amazing lady, amazing chick, just gorgeous inside and out. It's great ideas, really stands up for what she believes in, holds me to my ideas very painfully so sometimes. Sometimes I want to strangle her because she, forces you to really bring your ideas forward in the proper way that they need to, and is going to press you if you don't. But she's awesome. She's over in Europe, changing the world. I would try and break down what we talked about, but honestly, those are one of the ones where might be the furthest outside my comfort zone. If you want to hear what she does, go listen to the episodes. I think they're great. Yelena, and then Justin Vedras, another one of the guys like Bill Pickering that I mentioned earlier that had a very big impact on shaping me when I was in university. One of those older people that you kind of look up to for reasons that you almost don't even, I don't think I have them articulated out exactly what I look up to in Justin, but I do. And he's Daddy Justin now, living a new path. And he's one of those guys I know I'll have on the podcast lots in the future, but I'm excited to catch up with him, because I don't know what it is exactly that I look up to in Justin, but it definitely is it dovetails very closely with a lot of what goes into being a good father. And that's why I'm excited to see the journey that he's on right now. I'm excited to see where it goes, because I think he is custom made to excel in that domain. And I think that's awesome. And I think those are skills that are attributable to whatever you do in life, and he'll be successful in whatever he tries. But I think just in that one specific domain, in terms of parenting, I think he's going to be awesome. I'm fascinated to see how that goes. Which brings us to episode 18, which is with Alex McKendry, who played really high level hockey, played in the NHL for a couple seasons, was part of the, got a Stanley Cup ring with the Islanders back in their dynasty days. In the heyday, came up, got a couple of influential goals in some primetime moments, right? Like, he's not a guy that, played 15 years in the NHL. He was up and down. And what I loved about Alex was just the morals, and he's just such a solid guy through and through. And you can hear that articulate through everything he says. And what was meaningful about that episode was up until that point, I was getting really comfortable with these Zoom interviews, and I knew that in-person interviews is the way I need to go, and I need to get practice with it, but I got comfortable and I was scared. And I wasn't admitting it to myself. I was just telling myself, I can't do in-person interviews because all this COVID. It's COVID, right? And that's what I kept telling myself. But then I recognized, actually, no, it was in the episode I did a couple back with Sean, and he was talking about entrepreneurship and being ready, and what a double-edged sword things like that can be, because you have to be honest with yourself about what you are and aren't ready for, but you can also use that as a crutch to prevent yourself from doing something you're scared of, even though you know it's good for you, because you can rationalize it in some way. And that's what I was doing with this, of not doing it in person. So I recognized that, and I said, okay, this week I need to have someone on. And Alex is local to Grand Prairie here, and he was able to come over to the house, and we did it. And I was nervous as hell. Oh, was I nervous? I was nervous about the equipment working and all this stuff, and taking his time, and it was so scary, but so rewarding to do another, and to have that, because at that point, let me look up what the date was on that one. That would be episode 18. So that was September. So from about June to September, I was doing all Zoom interviews, and this is the first time going back to in person. And it was such a fire that lit under me of, oh man, like, it's been so much fun. I've been enjoying this so much, doing this through Zoom, but this in-person stuff, like, oh, how did I forget this? Like, why was I scared of it? Yeah, or I know exactly why I was scared of it, because it was scary as hell, and it's going to be scary. It's still scary having in-person interviews, and the Zoom ones for that matter, but it's so worth it at the end of the day, that it really got me excited to bring that forward, and to try and make sure that any point, I was always at least getting some in-person interviews. Like I can't just be satisfied if I did, if I did 20 interviews in a month, right? But they're all on Zoom. I still need to force a couple in-person ones in there. And that was a great learning lesson at that point too, to remember that. And not only that, but just that lesson of, hey, fuck face, you're really good at lying to yourself. Don't listen to this bullshit about, COVID and all that. Be honest with yourself. Don't hide shit in the fog. Like full Jordan Peterson, you need to be honest about why you're doing these things and why the decision making you are, or you're just holding yourself back. That didn't hurt anybody but me to have me, listen to the lies and feed into the bullshit for how many episodes there, for how many months from June to September of not doing the in-person interviews for nothing but fear, right? Which is very much similar to me not jumping into streaming right now. I have all these excuses and all these reasons, but at the end of the day, I'm just really nervous about it, and I'm scared to fail, and that's what's holding me back. And I know that, and that's why I'm forcing myself. And I'll get into it later in the episode now that I'm close to it, of kind of where that's going. But that was another impactful one. Was Alex doing the first interview in person. Then VDC 19 with Catherine. Catherine is a very special human, very spiritual, very connected, very emotionally intelligent. And fucking weird and funny in the best ways. When I was in university, the hardest I remember laughing in that first year was with Catherine and Amy, who I have to have on the podcast as well. Amy McDonald, great lady, but we would just have the most ridiculous intellectual conversations about life and sexuality and all these things. And then we just have the weirdest dance parties in the lounge and just be goofballs. And she embodies a lot of what I want to do on this podcast, of having the intellectual side and be able to talk about these subjects, but then still have a little bit of weirdness and not to take yourself too seriously. She's the perfect example of that. And if you want to listen to an episode of that where we talk about some really deep things, but also have a lot of fun, that's a perfect one. Then just funny that they'd be back to back. Catherine, then the next episode I did was with my cousin Katrina, who is such a cool cat, like always has been. Cool cat, name's Cat. Anyway, fun joke. I didn't even realize I made it until it was already out of my mouth. Anyways, with all my cousins on that side, and there's a bunch more cousins on this side that I'm having back on, we're just waiting for the right timing to line up. But I was always so much younger that I never really got to fully converse with them in a peer-to-peer way, because it was always through a lens of a 10-year age difference and looking out for someone and being the little, the baby of the family. And I always had these ideas of where those connections were if we were to be peer-to-peer in a sense like this, of where we would connect and what kind of differences and closenesses we'd have. And it was interesting to have Katrina on to see how similar we are in a spiritual manner, and to see how much of the same ideas we share, maybe just under different language, but so similar. And it was a very fun experience. And I feel like we've been so much closer since that, just to know that we have that mark. And again, Katrina's someone I have to have back on again, but that was super fun. Episode 21 was TJ Foster, who, if you're from Slave Lake, you'll know him. He was, the best hockey player to come out of Slave for kind of my age group. Comes from a great family that really values humor and hard work, and love the family through and through. The parents to all the kids, they're all awesome and all have something to say. And really enjoyed that episode we put together. And it was fun because I think that episode also brought in a different audience for me. Of people always look at names and stuff on the podcast of, I think this is a trap that lots of podcasters fall into, and I fall into too. I'm not outside of this, but I try all the time to frame it as far away from this as possible. Of, what is going to get me the most views? Like, who's a name? What is this going to have to do? And I try as much as possible not to think about that. I want to think about it as, what are people going to enjoy, right? Like, if it's going to get a lot of views and people are going to really enjoy it, that's great, but it shouldn't be on the views, right? But it was nice to have a bump where, when I had TJ on, it was clear, like, oh, people enjoyed this. People, liked seeing somebody that they knew. And that was, probably a sign to come of how this podcast is going to grow at the start. If I'm not putting a bunch of money into advertising. And that's another thing at this point, and still to this point today, but especially back then, I would just post it on my Instagram. Like, I'm not paying any money to advertise it or get people to know it or really trying to grow the numbers. I was just concentrating on the content, and that's what I was doing at that point. But yeah, me and TJ talked about streaming and life and growing up and hunting and hockey and what it teaches you. And it was a great conversation. I really enjoyed that one. Then it was, that's about end of September. We did, I had Courtney back on for her third time, I guess, kind of, and this was leading up to October. So I don't know if you guys remember, but in October, I decided to do this Sober October, Optimize October kind of thing. Like, it started with Sober October, where Joe Rogan and a couple other comedians just were going to be sober for October, and then they added in these weird wacko challenges and stuff. And what I took that as is something I see with podcasting more so than what you get out of the podcast itself is the lifestyle that it affords you. And I see these people that do podcasts, and I see the lifestyles they live, and they get to, you know, you listen to Joe Rogan, and he obviously does other things too, but you know, he gets to do his sauna and his jujitsu and all these things that he wants to pursue in his day, and a podcast and stuff. And he enjoys every inch of it. And an idea that I had was, for 1 month, I want to live as closely to I can of what I would do if I had all the time in the world and I could just be the peak self, right? Like, so meditating twice a day, reading, you know, no liquor, no drugs, no nothing, just everything I could do in the best way to kind of mirror what I hope to in 10, 20 years from now, when I have built this podcast to a point where I can structure my life to do whatever I want. And I don't ever have to do anything I don't want to do. How will I live that? And that was the start of it, right? And it was fun. So that episode with Courtney, was kind of breaking down my philosophy on what I wanted this Optimized October to look like and what it was going to be. And I didn't know what I was getting myself into either, because that was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. The mental health toll of living that life is very different. You know, when you don't have those little rewards of your, you know, that little piece of chocolate, or, you know, in whatever sense that is, or that glass of wine at the end of the day. It was a tough month to get through. And I think, it taught me a ton about my relationships, my relationship with myself, my relationship with my closest people around me, my relationship with things, with food, with booze, with drugs, with all these, like with everything that I changed everything in that month, which forces you to examine your relationship with my breath, with my stretching, with yoga, with all these things, right? Like, it just, I learned a ton about my relationships in that month, and what I did. So then that was episode 22. Episode 23 was with Woogie, Sean Gramlich, another Slave Lake guy to the core. He's put on these icebreaker hockey games, concerts, events, big community guy, is part of the town council. Was a really fun conversation. And this one was meaningful to me because Sean was excited to come on. And it made me feel really good. And he was, you know, a little bit nervous, but he said, like, hey, I enjoy what you do, and I'm excited. I'm showing. It was one of those ones where it feels like a lot of times it's a nervous thing, and I'm kind of forcing people to come on, telling me, like, I promise you're gonna have fun, you're really gonna enjoy it, and they end up doing it. But Sean from the start was like, no, I'm really excited to do this. Like, thank you for having me on. Like, I hope I do good. And for whatever reason, that was the first time it really hit me of what this could be. And that's again, what I want this to be one day, is that people are familiar with it and they know what they're getting into, and they know that they're gonna have a good time, that they're excited to come on. That meant a lot. And I think you guys will be able to hear it if you went back and listened to that episode. I think you'll be able to hear that in the episode itself, of the confidence to know that somebody's excited to be there and excited to put forward, and has listened to a couple episodes and wants to do well and wants you to do well. Like, it was a cool thing. And that's why that episode was really special for me. And I'm sure I'll have Woogie on again in the future. We got lots to talk about. Then the next episode was with Marley Corrigan. Marley I met in Lister. Well, first I met her brother, Carter. I think he was in the same as first year. Me and him weren't as close in first year. Our friend groups were kind of close, and we'd hang out. He was in Mackenzie Tower on 7 Mac, who was the only floor pretty much in Mackenzie that I really knew, because they were friends with some of the guys on 3K who I was hanging out with Catherine and Amy, who I talked about earlier. And he was a very special guy, you know, in a lot of ways. And then Marley came the next year or the year after, I can't remember. But that year that she came at Christmas, Carter was in a tragic accident, and we lost him just before Christmas that year. And it was a huge impact for the entire Lister community, the university community. He was just such an impactful guy that touched so many people and was so loving and so special in a million different ways. To lose him, it was a huge hit. And Marley came on the podcast and talked about that, and talked about her journey of chasing a musical career, or I don't know if she wants to be a career, just a passion, chasing music. And I loved it. And it was such a fun conversation. That one was, I don't know. I was a little disappointed in myself on that one. I just felt like I wasn't in the right headspace from work. I didn't meditate before it. I wasn't ready for it. And I still think it's a good episode, and I don't think you guys would notice if I was, but just to be honest with you guys, I was very disappointed in myself after. I feel like I didn't bring everything to that to do the right honor to what I could have. And she is so special and her family is so special. And what I was trying to articulate with that was through the process of losing Carter and through the process of watching her family and her parents and her siblings deal with that, all that it taught me. And I learned so many lessons from that. And I really wanted to articulate that in the episode and the conversation we have. And I did to a point, but again, it's hard on myself. And I don't think I achieved the levels that I thought I could and did as well as I thought I could with that one. And, that was so nice to have that, to be a little bit disappointed in it, but have that couched with all the love that I got from Marley and from her family and from her parents and from, the support that they get. And, her parents still like my posts on the VonDubCast and still support this podcast and stuff through that stuff. And that made me feel so good I know I'm beating myself out of it, but it can't have been that bad. If they got something out of it, enjoyed it enough to at least not hate the podcast and hate me and hate my guts, right? Like obviously catastrophizing thinking, but it's nice to have that. And that was a big moment to know that even if you don't hit the high expectations that you set for yourself, especially if you know that you're setting high expectations and you don't want to quit doing that, but you can have a little bit of compassion, a little bit of space for yourself there. And it's nice when other people came and do that too. Episode 25 was with Damon Cardinal, another guy from Slave Lake, a guy who I knew growing up. He was a year older than me in school, but always had friend groups around each other, was friends with lots of his friends and lots of his cousins. And, growing up, I've talked about it a million times on this podcast, my weight and my body image, and still to this day, and not saying I'm over it, but was always a big issue. And Damon was a bigger guy and at a certain point in his life made a change and really slimmed down and got into health and is helping other people. And now he's a personal trainer and he's been chasing that dream. And to talk with him about that was really, really special. And I feel like we were able to cover a lot of ground and cover a lot of information that people want to hear through an honest lens. And I feel like so much of diet culture and stuff is trying to make a quick fix and all this stuff, when really it's, at the end of the day, it's very complex. It's very unique to the person that's doing it. And if you don't think of it through that lens, that's why you're almost dooming yourself to fail. And I think that was a really good conversation to go to. And actually me and Damon had probably recorded 5 or 6 episodes, I think, for his podcast, that he's doing something. He's going to release them at some point. I know he's got a lot on the go. They're getting a new gym built. He's got plans and he's going to do something with them. But me and Damon have actually talked a lot since then. And I'm excited for you guys to hear some of those conversations too. Then episode 26 was Sean Newman, I've recorded since then a couple times. He's a guy out of Lloyd who did his own podcast in very similar sense to mine. I had no idea he'd even done it until, I reached out to him right away when I found him. So if we record, or if I release that episode on October 13th of 2020, I'd probably maybe found him at the start of October. And I just reached out to him right away and said, holy shit, like you're doing exactly what I want to be doing. You're having on, Braden Holtby and Tanner Bozer and all these huge people and kind of doing it. And he'd been doing it for a couple of years and he has sponsors, and just was really cool to see somebody from another small town in Alberta chasing this dream and making it a reality. It was cool to see that there is a path there and you can have success. And I think it was the first guy I had on that has a podcast as well and knows a little bit of the rhythm and knows how to carry the conversation forward and go with it. It was very fun to do that as well, because eventually when I blow this podcast up into the, Joe Rogan number 2, that, I fully believe I can, and I hope you guys do too. That's going to be something I'm doing more of, and I'll get that experience more often, is having people on that do this for a living and are professionals and can really, bat that ball around and get some rallies going. And that was the first experience of that, and it was really fun. And I can't recommend that episode enough. Then we did one with Evan Gerard, one of my buddies from university in second year. He was one of my first years that came up, and always just really liked his mindset and how he went about things, right? He's another one of those episodes where I talked about of there's something within that kid that I really, really look up to and really value, and I don't know how to articulate it. And I wanted to bring that forward on the podcast, and where I felt like I maybe missed the mark a little bit on the earlier ones with Fraser and Simon, I feel like Evan, even though it was Zoom, still brought out a lot of Evan on the podcast. And I think people will listen to that one and know kind of what I see in him. And I was really proud of that one to bring that forward. And again, doesn't mean I don't want to bring him on in person and show even deeper what those things are and what he has to offer. But I was really proud of that one, and I really liked the conversation we had. It was fun to kind of get into some of the nerdier areas, talk about some League of Legends, talk about streaming, talk about speed running, all these things that I really love, but just hadn't had the right guests to really bandy them about. So that was fun. Episode 28, open letter to Prime Minister Trudeau with Sky Libert and Daniel Baker. So Sky and Daniel are two Masters of Geology students at the U of A. I saw a thing on LinkedIn about these two students that were putting together a letter trying to ask for a fair shake for the energy industry in Canada, and just kind of a call out of the demonization that we're seeing, and just an ask for fair conversation around it. Not saying, let's throw environmental regulation out the window. It's saying, let's find a fair balance that really balances things. And we had an amazing conversation. We had to do it over 2 days because Sky was dealing with a concussion, but we ended up putting together a 2.5 hour conversation that was just impeccable. I thought it was amazing. Like no name calling, like all facts, not fair, all our version of facts, right? Like all trying to bring things forward and trying to ask questions that would put us in a better place to make better decisions. And that was eye-opening, because just the fact that I used Prime Minister Trudeau's name in the episode, I couldn't share it, I couldn't do anything, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. I see how you got control over it. And actually, after I put that episode out, the downloads got pretty compressed after that too. It's interesting to see. But again, if you're chasing something where you're just concentrating on the content and you don't concentrate on the downloads, stuff like that is only a bump in the road. But that was an awesome interview. I think you guys will really like that if you wanted to go check that out. If that's kind of things up your alley, I think we really made a strong case for the environmental side and why we need it. And then also made a really strong case for, the other side of it, for the fact that Canada is one of the most amazing energy industries that is the safest and most environmentally conscious of the world, and that's something we should be proud of, and also stood up for that. So I really like that conversation, even if it maybe brought a little bit of negativity down on the podcast onto myself. Episode 29 had Damon on again. I think this one might have been in person. I think maybe, or I can't remember. One of the Damon Cardinal episodes was in person that I recorded in Edmonton, and that was fun to get in front of him and get a little deeper. Again, like I said, me and Damon have a lot more than what's publicly available that we've recorded, and I'm excited for you guys at one point to take that all in. Episode 30 was with Cody Twin. Cody, I grew up with. We rode the same bus. He grew up on the reserve, and my house was just by the reserve, so that was kind of my bus route. It was the reserve, and then kind of by my place. And so I knew all these kids growing up, and Cody was one of my best friends when we were really young. And he was a year older, and then the hockey years were kind of different, and he played on different teams, and we kind of lost track of each other, and how close we were in the grades, the 1s and the 2s and the 3s and the 4s, kind of as you get into the junior highs, and it's just natural, it separates out, and we went down different paths, and there was a lot of anger in Cody's life, and he ran into some trouble, and then in these last couple of years, I'd reconnected with him, and I just saw this change of, clearly he had seen some things, been through some things, and really come out on the other side with some real wisdom and some real knowledge. And the way he articulates it is so unique to him and so beneficial to others that I just think he needs to be amplified in so many ways. And I want to get him back on the podcast, but the conversation we had, this is one. If you take any of these recommendations, you want to go back to an episode, go back to Cody. It was in person. We went down to Slave, and we sat in the basement, and I set up the mics. And when he told me that story, it was deep, and it was interesting to hear the story, because so much of it I was there for, but didn't have the knowledge to make sense of it. So it just didn't make sense with my sense of who this kid was growing up with him, and who my good friend was. To see the trouble he was getting into, it didn't make sense. And then when he opened up all the aspects of who he is, and his sexuality, and the struggles that he had, and what was okay to be and what wasn't okay to be, and the racism, and so much of all went into it. It all just snapped together perfectly, and like, oh, I see who you are, and I see what you've been through. And it was so beautiful. And that was an emotional podcast, and I was so thankful for him to do it. And I hope that he got something out of it. And I hope that people listening got something out of it, of what representation does, and how important that is. And I think there's a million other lessons in that. You'd have to go back and listen to catch them all. But I just thought that episode was like, holy shit. Like, I've never had it. That was episode 30. I don't think any of the episodes up to that one had, reached those moments of, like impact. I think that episode, in the right hands, in the right ears, on the right eyes, could change somebody. And that was something that was cool to see. And something that is like, oh, I want to do more of. So definitely that's one that you want to go back to. I'm going to say probably all the ones that I got to do in person, I would recommend going back for a listen if you didn't check them out, or if you're just looking for ideas for them. But that was definitely one of them. Then episode 31 had Kyle back on, Cuggy, one of the guys I had at the start. We talked, about meditation, because he was talking to me about meditating and what went into it. And I was trying to find a way, because I was getting more and more into meditation, of bringing to the listeners a couple of my little tips and tricks of how I meditate, try and open the door to somebody else to get some of the benefit out of it that I got. And we talked about, he orders shoes and sells shoes, and he's just got a whole stack. He just put some pictures up on Instagram. He's got like a whole room full of shoes now. Anyway, and also DJing and putting sets together and all that, because Kyle also has played some pretty decent sized shows. I think he played Scream in Edmonton at the event center and stuff, like pretty big shit. And it was really cool, really fun conversation. Then the next one was a very impactful episode for me. Well, impactful episode for sure, but just what went around this episode. So episode 32 was with Brennan. And Brennan was my buddy from school and is one of the biggest guys at the SU, and is the one who really helped me get the podcast to the next level. When I approached him, he's the one that helped me get the YouTube channel going. He's the one that helped me do so much of the actual, like, making it professional. It's still not very professional, but the professionality that is there is pretty much all thanks to Brennan. So that was huge. And then we also did an episode together, and we were supposed to do it on a Friday at this new studio. So we get there on the Friday, and not new studio. It was a studio that they'd set up at the SU for podcasting. This it was almost like a little podcast studio that they'd set up, but then COVID hit, and it was just kind of sitting with no use. And the university's empty because of the pandemic and all lockdown, so nobody's there. So he said, "Yeah, we can come. We can come use it. Let's try it out." We didn't have the right equipment that day on the Friday to record. Me and him were going to record an episode. So he said, "Let's do it tomorrow. Let's just go grab some beers." And that night, it was the first time hanging out with someone throughout the pandemic, of just grabbing a beer with somebody and seeing what they're up to. And it was so nice to be taken seriously. I kind of let down the guardrails and let Brendan in on the big plans I had for the podcast and where I wanted to take it. And he took it seriously and, laughed a little bit where it was appropriate to laugh, like, "Oh, you crazy bastard." Like, that's, that might work if you put enough into it. You might make it happen. But if you want to do that, try this, right? You're going to need a website. You're going to need this. You're going to need that. And just helped feed into it and feed into the crazy a little bit, and just help, volley the ball back a bit so I could extend my ideas out and kind of fully flesh them out with somebody else, because it's hard to do that in your own head. I do it all the time, but it's so much easier when you have somebody else that you respect, that you can bounce things off of. So that was huge. And then the next day we recorded that episode, and it was great. It was so nice to catch up with Brendan. I also just think Brendan's an extremely intelligent person, and even past the intelligence, just an extremely capable person. He doesn't let things stand in his way. He looks it up. He'll figure it out, which I think is a skill set that cannot be understated. And I've told Brendan that for that reason and I've told him that is one of the things that I admire in him so much, is his capability. And for that fact that if for any reason the SU, he gets sick of it, or if they don't treat him right, I told him, like, you come on board with whatever I'm doing, whatever company, I would bring you on board. And I would say that to anybody. I probably shouldn't say it too loud on this podcast because people are going to do it too. But, like, I'd hire him even if I didn't have a position, just to figure it out. He will find a position because he's that capable, right? Like, he's one of those people. And I just value that so highly. And not only that, but then he helped me, get that studio going and bring other people into it. That moment with Brendan was the start of a lot of really big things for the podcast from there. After that, there's a couple episodes, number 33 and 34. I had Simon and Fraser back on for their second episodes, both online again. I think I was a little disappointed in myself because I didn't think I fully brought forward what was the best parts of Simon and Fraser in their first episodes, which I really enjoyed those episodes, and they're great too, but I just felt like I could have done more. And I still didn't quite get to them in another great episode, but I just think with guys like that, I need to do it in person. I need to get Simon and Fraser on for, get a couple beers in them, do 3 or 4 hours and just bullshit and get them settled in and comfortable, and the mics fade away, and then we'll get the real sense of them. But those were really fun episodes to do. I always enjoy the ones that I do with my close friends, even if it's maybe not the perfect podcast, just the catching up and the filling of the personal cup that you get out of those ones make it all meaningful, right? And it's hard to have an episode every week for these people. And sometimes you just got to do one for yourself. Sometimes it's for you, sometimes it's for the audience, right? And at the end of the day, I feel like pursuing that keeps it honest and keeps it fresh for you guys. So then after those two, did a series of in-person ones. So this is the next weekend that I was able to get back to the city with Brendan and in that studio. So first we had on my buddy Sod, and we had an amazing conversation, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about, of getting in front of somebody, the depths that we can go on these conversations, and the willingness to push a little harder and push back against these things. Like me and Sod's conversation, I'd say that was probably one of the highlights of the whole year, was that conversation. We touched on some things, and because we did it in the studio and we had the cameras going, was able to get it up on YouTube. And then Sod clipped some of them and started to advertise it on his social media of just, 2 minutes of us talking about this, 3 minutes of us talking about this. And it was really awesome. And it was kind of an eye opener for what it could be in the future. Then the next day I did one with Lars Caliu, who's a local Edmonton comedian. If anybody's heard me talk, I love stand-up comedy. It's what got me into podcasting. It's what I loved as a kid when my parents would take me to see Russell Peters when I was definitely not old enough to probably go see Russell Peters. On the Comedy Network, anytime I could catch stand-up when my parents weren't looking, I was always watching. I just love it to bits. So to have my first stand-up comedian on was a huge moment. And then to have it in the studio and to feel that professionality of having Brendan on the mic producing, right? He can look stuff up from us, like it's like my young Jamie. It was just such a cool experience. It meant so much to me, and I really came out of that weekend flying, and then we also did my first of the solo episodes I tried to do, and I had my buddy my best friend Chase and Brendan in the room, and we bounced off each other. So that was episode 37, was the Von solo. We talked about UFC, current events, me, Chase, and Brendan just kind of shooting the shit. That was another fun one, and I left that weekend doing those in-person interviews in that studio, feeling very professional, and so fired up that I took a swing that Monday. When I got back, I was like, oh man, I'm feeling it. And I reached out to two of my favorite authors, the Coen brothers, who wrote these amazing books called The Unincorporated. Well, the first book's called The Unincorporated Man, and then there's Unincorporated War, and it's called The Unincorporated series. It's about 4 books, and it is spectacular. Some of the best books I've ever written. I didn't write them. I never wrote the books. The Coen brothers wrote the books. I don't know where that came from. Anywho, best books I've ever read. And for them not only to say yes, because that was a huge moment, the fact that he reached out and I got a response was cool. Then that it all came to fruition that quick, and just, I don't know. I've talked about this ad nauseum on the podcast of how much that interview meant, because I feel like it was one of those, it felt like I'd stumbled into one of my daydreams that I daydreamed about all the time, of people to talk to one of these heroes like the Coen brothers and ask all the questions about the books that, like, am I imagining this theme here? Is that actually something you guys are, no, yeah, actually, I'm glad you picked that up, because that is one of our bigger themes, right? Like, oh, that was so fucking cool. Still, like, and to know that in the future, I'm going to have more opportunities to do that, and more of my heroes on, and more of those questions that I always daydreamed about being able to ask, I'll get to ask. It was so cool and so meaningful, and really just, not that the fire was ever dimming, but just reignited that fire to chase this passion and make it serious, and make sure that I was on the right track. And it sure did that. And I think that's one where I knew, like, if I was looking at things through the lens of what's going to get most downloads, the odds of people, listening to these authors that they'd never read before, probably not that high. But what I got out of that interview, and it was so worth, even if nobody listened to it, it was so worth it to me. And that was cool to see. Episode 39, Trevor Hoffart, honestly, just was on LinkedIn, saw somebody commenting on a Lex Friedman post, and he was talking about electric cars, and kind of just creeped him and came into it, saw that he was, an Alberta boy, and just had a gut feeling, and just went, you know what? I'm going to ask him on the podcast. And I did. And we had a really fun conversation. He's a really interesting young kid. I don't know how young he is. I said that very confidently. He might even be older than me. I don't know. But we had a really fun conversation about electric cars and life and philosophy. And it was fun just to, just have a gut feeling of, I think this kid's going to be interesting. Let's have him on. And just to see it go that well. It was really fun. Episode 40 was Scott Sinclair. He's the transportation head at Nate. He's been at Nate for 2 decades now. I don't know, a long time, at least decade and a half, I'd say. And gets to see all the new things in the trade world. And we talk about our trip that we went down to the SEMA car show down in Vegas, and that he does that every year, and how he brings on new equipment sponsors and stuff for Nate. It was just fascinating. I love that conversation, and talking about, bringing females into the trades and the amazing transformation he's seen in that domain. Just a great conversation. I don't think that's one of those ones that I don't think it got the flowers that it deserved, because I feel like he was just on fire and he had so much to say, and I learned so much from that episode. I feel like, Nate's silly for not putting that on their front page. Maybe that's me being a little bit cocky myself, but I'd put that on right on the pamphlet for Nate. If you could put somebody like Scotty that is that passionate about the industry and speaks so well about it. I just think it was a great one. I'm very proud of that one. Episode 41 was the Zona golf trip wrap up. So over Christmas, me, Chase, and my dad went down to Phoenix and golfed a bunch of courses, and we're very safe from the pandemic. But that was right around the time where all these politicians are leaving for Christmas, and everyone's saying all this stuff about how they're the worst people in the world. So that was an interesting one to do, because when I do this podcast, I want to be open and transparent with you guys about it. I don't want to hide stuff from you. Like, yeah, I traveled and I laid exactly out why I thought it was safe and what risks I thought I was taking and everything. And I stood by it, and I had hoped that, there wouldn't be any backlash, and there wasn't. I don't think anyone really said anything to me. Maybe behind my back, people said some things, but it was fun to just wrap up that trip and tell all the stories of, you go for 10 days or whatever with 3 dudes. There's, in that many rounds of golf, there's going to be some stories that come out of it. And just to, have a couple laughs and hear Ingo talk in the lingo of me and Chase after 8 days of us infecting it with him, and some of the vocabulary that was coming out of his mouth was pretty fun. So really like that episode. Then we had Taylor Kellum, another local Slave Lake guy, very similar to the Woogie of just, it was nice to have somebody that was excited to come on and try it, a little nervous. And we had a fun conversation, a little lighthearted, covered some local Slave Lake stuff. And it was just fun, a fun little episode to catch up with. And another one of those personal episodes that I really enjoyed. Then we had on Kaylee Marks. He's the founder of Podcast Farm. He's a guy that, interesting cat. He helps people get podcasts started and kind of chase dreams. And he's very spiritual and very centered to his personal truth, and wants to help guide people to maybe doing the same. I'm trying not to put words in his mouth of what, I'm trying to make my explanation of what I see he does as a whole. But I mean, Podcast Farm, just as the business arm of it, wants to help people do podcasts. It's cool just to get another person that is passionate about the forum and the medium that is podcasting. It was fun to have that conversation, and allowed me to maybe get to some subjects that I wouldn't have on my own or without somebody that has that passion as well. Then the next episode was 44 with Sod, who I said was one of my first in-person interviews in the studio, episode 35, that everyone should check out. It was right when all the Wall Street bet stuff was going on, and I had him on, and we had a great little conversation that Friday night, posted it that night, like just a quick and dirty, let's talk about this. What do we see right now about the whole industry and the cover-ups and all the things. I thought it was a fantastic little conversation. We threw it up. It was fun. Episode 45 was with my buddy Gonzo, who is another buddy from Lister, who is just a source of positivity, radiates that smile, and just, it's hard to be in a bad mood when you're around him. He is such a good dude, and it was so much fun to bring that to people. And he was one of those episodes of people, oh man, your friend Gonzo. I was like, yeah, I know, he's a great guy. And everyone's like, yeah, like I just had a smile on my face listening to him, right? Like, especially if you watch it on YouTube, you'll see he just he's infectious and just has a great worldview. Episode 46 had Sam Wright, who is the president of the LHSA, which is the Lister Hall Students Association. In my second year, in my second year. Yes. And we had battles with the LHSA had battles with the university, and they wanted to shut down the LHSA and all this stuff. And we went into it in detail and how awful the University of Alberta was throughout it, and just despicable at the end of the day. So not the university itself, but the people that they allowed to carry out these despicable acts in their name was awful. And I still have a lot of contempt for them and some of the things that they did. But we really highlighted it and showed the human cost of these kids, because we were kids at the time. All of us on the council, the VPs that are 18 to 21, have all this schooling on top of us, marks and grades and expectations, and then we also have this entire university system dragging us through the mud and gaslighting us and all this stuff. It was very very emotional to go back to that time, because I'd forgotten about so much of it. Oh, it was interesting. And it was good to kind of reminisce and bullshit and get a little bit off our chest. It was almost a bit of a therapy session for us both, I think. But that was fantastic to get out there. And actually after, I don't know if that had anything to do with that conversation as I saw it, but one of the people, there's so many actors within that, but one of the people from the university actually reached out to Sam and apologized for his own actions, just said, I hope that the other people see that too, of what they did. And I don't want to say that he even heard this episode, or maybe he did, but it was beautiful to see that a change could be made, and that is out there in the universe that people do expect to see, and that they did recognize, hey, what we did was pretty wrong there, and we probably shouldn't have done that to these kids. But what can we do now except move forward and try not to let things like that happen again. Then the episode after that one was Sam, episode 47 with Yelena Makura, who I had on earlier. Told you if you want to hear what she does, go check it out. Had her back on for another shorter episode, just an hour and a half. Nice little catch up, see what she's up to. She is climbing her way through whatever ladder of I'm trying to classify the work she does, but with how quickly she is dominating. And I said this from the start, even in the intro of having Yelena on, I just knew from the moment I met her, whatever this chick gets into, she is going to dominate it, right? And I didn't know what that was, but now that she's found it, she is. So it was nice to kind of do a little check-in with her and see how much further along she was already in that domain that she had chosen. Then episode 48. This is my first, so I said the first solo episode I did was that one in the studio with Chase and Brennan, because when I was thinking about doing solo episodes, I was thinking I'd have kind of a producer to bring me current events and that type of thing, and that's what we kind of tried with Chase and Brennan, but we just didn't plan it well enough. We thought we could kind of do it off the top of our head, just hop on Reddit, like current events and stuff, and it needed to be way more structured, and if I try that way again, it's just going to have to be way more put into it than I think we thought. So this was my attempt, just other than that, just to pick a couple topics, and Bill Burr, I don't know if anybody's listening to Bill Burr's podcast, but he just pretty much goes in front of a camera like this and rants at himself. And that first one I did on episode 48 was awkward, to say the least. Sorry, my throat always gets so dry when I do these solo episodes. It's a lot of talking. It was just weird the first time, and I'm doing it now, and this is, I don't know, maybe the 7th or 8th solo episode or type of this without a guest I've done since then, and it got so much easier after the first one, but that first one was a little bit sketchy, but it was so impactful. I cannot tell you guys the catharsis you get of just getting all this stuff off your chest in a medium like this. It feels so good, and I found that first episode really opened me up to that, and then since then I've learned the power and kind of stretched what I would and wouldn't be willing to talk to on that to get some of those things off my chest since then. And those solo episodes that started right there, I think that episode 48 is the real impetus or starting point of what those turned into now. And I think that was an important episode, because now those are a huge piece of my mental health. It's those solo episodes like this, right? Just being able to talk about whatever I want to talk about. Then episode number 49 was with Ankur. He's another guy from Lister that I didn't really know, knew very peripherally from Lister, but he had a podcast. Didn't really know what I was getting into with that one. Just thought he was a nice kid, and we had a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. It was lots of fun, and it was cool to see. It was cool to see I'm trying to find the right way to say it. It's fun. It's lots of fun to go into an episode with lots of prep work, maybe like a David McKinnon one where I've done 15 hours of work to go at this. And then there's fun ones where I think for Ankur, I listened to maybe 2 or 3 episodes of his podcast, and that's it. And just kind of got my vibe from that and just went into it blank and just see where the conversation went. It was lots of fun, and we really, really connected, even though we didn't know each other at all. It's just fun to see where those ones go. It's kind of a firecracker, right? You know it's going to go off, you know it's going to be something, but you don't really know what it's going to look like. Not that describes a firecracker whatsoever. Terrible, terrible allegory or whatever I just used there. Anyways, I digress. Man, did I do a lot of episodes this year. Jesus Christ. Episode 50, one of my favorites. This is another in-person one with Talha Sajjad, T, as I usually refer to him as. T was one of my best friends in Lister. When I first moved in a week early, he was already there, and I met him on the elevator ride up to the floor in Kelsey Tower, and we've been close friends ever since. And he grew up in Pakistan and has a very interesting worldview. Is very strong in what he believes, but if you push him, he will come around and he will see other viewpoints. And I really like that about him. And I felt like that conversation specifically, we got into some really sticky topics, right? Like, racism and Black Lives Matter and these types of things and not wholly, supportive of some of them. Right. But with the freedom that we allowed both of each other, that we know each other and we're not trying to be hateful, and to give space to articulate around these ideas instead of just hearing the label on the front and just turning off, holy man, you're a racist bigot, all this stuff. And I feel like that conversation really went a lot of places. And that is one of those ones where if you didn't listen to it, definitely give that one a chance. And also it was another one that we did in the studio in Edmonton. So it's got good video and it's a fun one to watch on YouTube as well. Episode 51, John fucking Morgan from MMA Junkie. This one still is very much in a similar vein to, the Colen brothers, the authors that I had on, like John fucking Morgan, first question at every presser, first question at every post-fight presser, right? Like in the MMA world, journalism, like on the floor, wow. Okay, this is two different things, because I think in MMA journalism, it's Ariel Helwani, right? Like who is the peak of the peak, tip of the top. He's that guy. But Ariel Helwani in the UFC fucking well, he doesn't hate the UFC, but Dana White fucking hates Ariel, right? So he's out of there. But within the ecosystem of the UFC, of who UFC's on good terms with, it doesn't get higher than John Morgan, right? Like who every fighter and every and every employee of the UFC is thrown to versus John Morgan at these press conferences, and he knows his shit. And it, again, was just one of those ones where I thought, like, I'm just going to see, maybe he'd come on and have a bullshit. And he said yes, and he's just such a nice guy. And we have such a cool conversation, and I love the sport so much, and just the entire time, it just seems surreal that I was actually talking to John Morgan, right? Like, and I can't tell you guys how much. If you don't like MMA, maybe not an episode for you, but if you have any sort of inkling, or you just want to hear me be really excited like a kid in a candy store talking to someone I really look up to, that'd be one to check out. I still can't speak highly enough of that one. The next episode was a solo episode again, and I don't remember what I talked about. I'm just going to read the description here real quick and see what I talked about, and then see if that jogs my memory, because these solo episodes all blend together. At least when there's a guest, I can kind of remember what they said a little bit more, because I always forget what I say, even if I was in the 50% of the conversation. Today's solo pod covers all sorts of topics, from my reacquaintance with Jordan Peterson. Oh, this is when I was getting right back into Jordan. Yeah. Oh, when I was reading The Fountainhead. Yeah, this was. That was a good one, yeah. Sorry. I guess I just read that just to give myself a pat on the back, because I thought that was a pretty good episode. Anyway, probably won't comment too much on these solo episodes. They're pretty much just breaking down what I was thinking of in the moment. Next episode was another, next little string of these are all Zoom ones. Natalia Matura, another Listerite. We talked a lot about mental health on that episode, the struggles that she's been through, I've been through, and just kind of what tools we use to get through them. The next one was with Eric Allen. He's a podcaster. He's got an MMA show. He's got an entrepreneur show. He's just kind of a all in on podcasting, has 3 or 4 shows, very much active on social media, has a very, wild life story, and is just kind of living life by his own rules. We just did kind of a quick little episode. I think that one's only an hour if you guys like the shorter ones. Again, when I didn't know what I was getting into with him, didn't really know him from a hole in the wall, but we had a great conversation. Episode 55. This was a cool one because this episode we streamed live on Danny's Twitch stream, Custom Sauce Boss. So he's been chasing the stream of being a streamer for a couple months now, at this point, of longer now, obviously, but at the time of recording. And I was just finished building this computer and was, chasing this dream that I'm still chasing of, streaming some video games myself and streaming some other stuff, streaming some podcasts live with a chat and have people, have a part of it. And that was our first time doing it. So it's cool. You know, like I had his Twitch stream up as we're having this conversation. It's going out live. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 people are watching it, but who cares? It's just the cool idea of it. So that one was really fun. Learned all about streaming and what goes into it. And selfishly, that was a big episode for me because I learned so much about this journey I'm going to embark on at one point of, you know, what goes into streaming and all that stuff. I got to ask all my questions. I felt like I came out of it armed with so much more knowledge. And if somebody's just, you know, wants to understand the Twitch world a little bit more and what streaming is, maybe you're, you know, listening to this and you're 60 years old and you hear the word Twitch thrown out all over. If you really want to understand a breakdown of it in long form, that's an episode for you right there. Then episode 56, this is the first episode of a string of episodes I did. I went down to Slave Lake for a wedding for my best buddy growing up, Clinton Miller's wedding, and was able to do a bunch of interviews down there. So the first one was Tyler Warman, the mayor of Slave Lake. We had just rolled into town, right? Because you had to do it as tight time frames. I got down, got everything set up, brought him down. He didn't have any idea what he was getting into. I don't think he knew how long it was going to be. I felt a little bit bad about this, right? Like, because I could tell he was busy and he's checking his phone, you know, he probably had a million things on the go, people calling him, and I was taking up his time. But even given all that, we were still able to settle in rather quickly and have a great conversation on politics and what it means and what it means to be a mayor and to have to broaden your horizons to make sure you're not just thinking things through your lens. You have to think about all these other people that have all these different experiences and how they think of things. And you have to really put yourself in a lot of people's shoes. And I feel like I learned a lot from talking to them. Then the next episode that I released, which would have been recorded after I did all these Slave Lake episodes that came out, was another was another solo episode. Mental health struggles, UFC 260 breakdown, general life updates. That gives you a breakdown of what that was. Then the next episode that released was with Travis Malbuff, who was one of my best friends growing up. This episode did some really good numbers. I don't like to think about that, but you know, I think people really liked hearing me and Trav just bullshit about, you know, funny ass stories growing up. And like, I came up from the basement of my parents' place and my stomach just hurt. Like my abs hurt from laughing so hard from that conversation. Like that one was a ton of fun. Then, actually in between this little run of Slave Lake episodes, actually, I released one with stand-up comedian Todd Ness. And like I mentioned earlier with Lars, stand-up is something that I hold in really, really high esteem, guys. And I think it's the hardest. That stand-up comedy and fighting are two things that I don't think people really, you recognize that they're hard, but you don't realize just how fucking hard that is to do and how scary and what goes into just chasing a dream like that. So I have a lot of value for it. And Todd was just so goofy and so much fun to have on. And the conversation we've had and his podcast, I love his podcast. So I listened to some episodes, obviously, to get ready for the episode we were doing together. And I fell in love with it. Still to this day, they're like 20-minute episodes, which I thought I'd be not into because I like the long form. But just, you know what? He probably puts out 5 or 6 a week, almost every day, just a 20-minute. And you listen to it on, you know, 2.5 speed. So it's like 9 minutes of your day. You just get this hilarious little bit of stand-up, right? Like his podcast is very similar to stand. Like he's just freewheeling, very Bill Burrish, right? Like it's just him and a microphone. And he talks about what's funny to him in that day. And he's such a funny cat that it just comes off amazing. I really love it. I think he is something special. I listen to a lot of comedy, and when I listen to his stand-up and I watch him and I see the grind that he has, I really honestly believe that he is going to be a household name. Like when he's what, like 29, like time he's 40, fucking rights, he's going to be big. You're going to be seeing him on TV and all those things, right? If he wants to do TV, I think TV's kind of bullshit and he's already doing bigger things than TV anyway. But if he wanted to do TV, he will do whatever he wants and he will be a very big name at that point. I think he just has the skill and the how to, and it's all in his hands. And our podcast episode was great. So go check it out. Then the next episode was the last one of our little Slave Lake bundle there. And it was my best friend, Drew, who I work with, our family's vacationing together, right? Like we have been, you know, brothers since we're 4. And we would always tell people, yeah, no, we're brothers. That was always our joking thing when we were little kids. We're 4 and 5. We'd always trick people into think we were brothers. And we thought that was hilarious. I don't know. Now it kind of seems kind of silly. Anyways, So we just had this awesome conversation for probably 2 hours, had a couple of rums and a whiskey or whatever. And then his brothers, Darby and Derry, both come down in the basement, right? And Drew had said, kind of mentioned like, oh, they might stop by, but I just didn't think that Derry and Darby would want, anything to do with it or be interested in it at all. So I just kind of, maybe they'll throw a show up. They probably won't, right? And they show up and then we start talking. And unfortunately, I thought the mics would pick up more, which is really sad. I don't think you get the full aspect of it, but it just means we got to do this again because it was so much fun. That last hour, whatever we did, and we would have done longer. That was a long episode. I think it was 4 hours we did with that. And the only reason we stopped it there was because I had to go to the rehearsal dinner for Miller's wedding, right? Like Alyssa had to end up coming downstairs and be like, hey, like we got to go. Right? I think you can hear it on the mics at the end of that episode, but we were just having so much fun and telling stories of, cause Derry and Darby were quite a few years older than me and Drew. So there was a bit of an age gap, but that's always fun to have. I was, me and Courtney weren't getting into too much trouble. So it was nice to have that little outlet of Darb and Derry to show me a little bit of the wild side of life and that, and to highlight the importance of it. I thought that was just a really fun episode. And I think people really enjoyed it as well. What came after that? Oh, after that. So I did a solo episode called The Episode That Shall Not Be Named. It was episode 61. And this is at the point where I was getting really fed up with the coverage of COVID and what was going on around it and being talked about. And it was such bullshit and there was so much clearly wrong with it. And I just wanted to take my time, and it was an hour? No. An hour and 20 minutes of just up until that point. And my mind has changed 1,000,000% since that episode. That was April 16th. So a couple months later, and I'm 100 degrees different again. And probably more so to the side. I found more stuff that has come out more than that, but just about how I see it and what information is being held back and where the conversations aren't being allowed to happen and where there's important information that people could use and should use and where we're being misled. So that was a fun one to do. I think people got some real value out of that. Episode 62 was Jennifer Sims from the Alzheimer's Society. This one I'm really proud of, guys. This is one of those areas for the podcast that I really wanted to go down, but I've just had some real speed bumps in getting into this domain of just having culturally important conversations, right? Like this, like on Alzheimer's and what, warning signs and understanding more around it, like in the long form. I'm really proud of the information that we got to on that episode. And I think anybody that knows anyone that suffered with Alzheimer's or has a family member, I just think this is a huge conversation. And even if you don't, just, you will eventually, and to be armed with this information sooner rather than later, the world is going to be a better place. Sorry, again, need another drink. I'm dry on a popcorn fart here. Beautiful. Then episode 63. This is another in-person episode. And again, I probably tell you guys that if you want to go back and listen to the episodes, the in-person ones are the best. This one was with Jen Meyer, who, another Listerite, one of the funniest people I ever met. Very different humor, very unique to her, and I get a real kick out of it, and I wanted to bring that to you guys, and I hope in that episode you get a kick out of it too. But not only that, past that humor, and that was kind of the only thing I was hoping that would get highlighted was her humor, but just a lot of really fun conversation. Got to talk about her applying to the RCMP and how that went and not getting in and the reasons and all of that, and she's in nursing school now, and our university experience, because she was part of the LHSA and getting in the fight with the university. She was one of those kids that was getting pulled onto the stand at the kangaroo court and dragged through the mud and all this stuff, and all while trying to still maintain a degree and go to school. And I was curious to ask her about going back to the U of A for more schooling after what they put us through, because me, when I got to the end, I was like, fuck you guys, I am so far away from you. Like, unless they come out and apologize, right? Like I want the best. I want to have compassion. I want them to change, but until they admit what they did wrong, you can't really expect them to change, right? So that was a great episode that we did. Was fun. We didn't do it in the studio. I just brought my recording equipment to my parents' place and just set it up in their garage, and we did it there. Episode 64 was the first. It was with a kid named Ethan Rubin, who I found through this group called the Peterson Pals that Michaela Peterson helped a young University of Toronto student put together, and just brings together a lot of people of a certain age, of a certain mindset, that are sick of the censorship and, are all brought together by the ideals that Jordan Peterson puts forth in his articles and his lectures and his books and all this stuff. And it's been a really cool group of people, and there's been some really cool discussions. And that was the first one. And we discussed Ayn Rand and Jordan Peterson and all these ideas. And he's just an extremely intellectual kid. He's maybe like 22. I'm trying to remember how old he was now, but grew up in India. I don't know. Shouldn't even say that. I shouldn't say grew up in India. I don't know. Indian heritage, let's say. Can't remember exactly. And it's been a couple months since we recorded this, but that was an awesome interview. Then it gets us into Lloydminster May. So I was able to do a trip down to Lloyd where I was able to record a bunch of interviews, and they were all in person, and they were all to a T exceptional. And then not only that, but I've told the story on one of the solo pods, I think, of what all went into that trip, but it was just such a great weekend. So nice to see family, and the episodes that came out of it were awesome. Starting with episode 65 was with Andrew Mavridis, who's a 1-0 professional but 8-0 total career MMA fighter that fights out of Lloyd, and he was just a really cool cat. Got to talk. I was planning on talking about his career and his journey with MMA more, but we ended up just talking about MMA and UFC and fighter pay and judging and rule sets and our favorite fighters. And it was just so much fun. I've been dying up until that point to talk MMA with somebody that had, some knowledge of it, because I just love the sport so much, but it's hard to discuss it with people that, don't really know about it. It's almost more frustrating than anything to talk about those people. It's fun also to educate people and show them the more intricate side of it, but it was also really fun to get into it with somebody that really knows it deep down. Then the next episode, 66, was another solo. Again, probably won't cover too much of that. Then episode 67 was with Ken Rutherford and Tanner Applegate from the War on Weakness podcast. And I really enjoyed their podcast. Tanner and Ken both have really different viewpoints. One is very light, one is very dark, one is very hard, one is very soft. Neither of them are soft. I shouldn't say that. It's a war on weakness, for goddamn sakes. But I mean, maybe compared to Tanner, Ken's approach is a little softer, maybe is a better way to frame that. But I really like how they go back and forth on their podcast, and I really enjoyed having them in front of me and able to bounce things back and forth. But what I enjoyed almost more than that was at the end of it when we finished, when Ken got there, he had brought one of his daughters, he has 6 kids. And he brought one of his daughters with him. And before we started podcasting, she was just part of the conversation with all the adults, like before we got started. And had really good points. I was just like, oh, that is a bright young kid. Like, good for her. Like, Ken must be doing it right. And then once we finished, and me and Ken kept bullshitting after, we just did a 3-hour podcast, and we kept bullshitting for probably an hour and a half, an hour after it. And his daughter was right in there with us, adding really salient points and connecting things that, she had just heard us talk about, pulling it back. Like, it's like, man, like, you were a bright kid. Like, that's awesome. And I love that. And I feel like that spoke to more of, that validated the ideas of what we're talking about almost more than anything else. Was, okay, you have a guy like Ken that thinks of the world this way, and this is the ideas he's espousing, and this is the effects of that. When he takes those values and those mindsets and puts it onto a child, this is what you come up with. This is the kind of kids we want, right? So obviously these things that we're talking about, I don't know if that makes any sense. It makes sense in my own head, but that somehow validated it all. Anyway, great episode. Really enjoyed it. I would recommend that one if people are looking for some ones to check out. Then I squeaked in episode 68 was an NHL playoff primer with Zach Sexton, who's another guy from Lister, and he writes on hockey and stuff. And we had planned this a while back, and we were just said, like, sometime before playoffs, we need to, hop in, just go over the matchups and all this stuff. And then we're like, holy shit, playoffs are starting. We had to do it like right then, got it edited and threw it back up. It was a really fun conversation. Nice catch up with him. We were way off on some shit, right on the money on some shit. It was kind of just a nice little hockey bullshit. Then Sean Newman, who I talked about earlier, who's the guy who really showed me that there was a path to podcasting as a guy from a small town, Alberta, Saskatchewan kind of thing. Had him on at the end. He was the last one that I did in person in Lloyd, kind of wrapping up that weekend on Saturday night. And me and him did like 3.5 hours. And it was so much fun to talk to somebody that had such a similar journey to me and is balancing the same things of trying to balance work and the podcast and all these other things in life and family and these types of things. It was so much fun. And he really pushed me because he has that intimate knowledge of what this journey is like. He was able to call me on some bullshit and really force me to bring ideas forward that I hadn't before around some of those topics. So I really, really got a lot out of that conversation. And yeah, it was great. And then episode 70 So this was, I didn't, Lloydminster May, I figured, I've got 3 episodes already. It won't be that hard to find a 4th. Ended up there's being 5 episodes in May, so I only did 4. Oopsies. Anyway. But I was just kind of thinking like, oh man, it'd be nice if I got one more episode of another Lloyd guy, but who am I going to get? And then just out of the blue, it was not long after actually when I recorded with Drew and his brothers Darby and Derry, they came down. And then after that, Drew said like, brother Brent, who's his uncle, his dad's brother, grew up with Corey Cross, the NHL player. He's from Lloyd. Like, you want to see if I can get his number? I said like, not thinking anything, like, yeah, for sure, like try, but like no worries if you can't. Like, I don't want to push nothing. I never want to be a bother to anybody. Like, don't worry about it. But a couple days later, hey, here's his number. Give him a call. Yeah, like Brent gave him the heads up. He's gonna that you'd be texting. Like, holy fuck! So now it's on me, and I got this number, and I gotta sit there chicken shit Nick here, like trying to text it out and line things up. And I finally reached out to him, and he said, yeah, like just skiing this weekend. Reach out to me on Monday, and we'll make something happen. So. Follow the rules. Okay, wait for the weekend Monday. Hey Corey, like can we make it happen at some point in the future? Kind of expecting way out, like in a couple months. And he goes, yeah, does tomorrow work? And I'm like, holy shit, like fuck, like Corey played fucking 12 to 15 years in the show, and then in Europe and all the played for the Oilers, played for the Red Wings with those superstars, was part of the Tampa Bay franchise when it first started, right? In the first couple of years, got to see that franchise grow. Like, to interview him, holy man, that was cool. And ended up being just one of the most down to earth guys, salt of the earth, really nice. I think, he's been very open to coming back on the podcast and talk to me more. And it's just goes to show what you build it all up in your head to be so nervous about. There's really not much once you push past that and actually get into it. Most of these things are a lot more enjoyable than you'd build them up to be. So that was kind of the last one of Lloydminster May. Really enjoyed that episode. 71 was with Angelo Isidoro. He is the chair of the Free Speech Club at the UBC. He's brought speakers there like Jordan Peterson. I'm trying to think of some others. Anyway, kind of a controversial figure. I didn't really realize this or think that it was that controversial, just because really the only attack on him is that he brings these people on that people disagree with to share their views. And that's, what free speech is at the end of the day. So it's not really an attack on him. It's an attack on free speech, and the attacks are pretty weak. Anyways, you know what? Some people had some issues with me having him on, but what I kept telling them was like, did you listen to the interview? Because it wasn't very hateful. We discussed some pretty interesting things. I thought it was a great conversation. Again, that was one of those shorter ones. That was, even with the intro and outro, that episode's 58 minutes. So again, if you're a fan of the shorter episodes, that's definitely one for you. Then episode 72 had my buddy Mike Shahan on. He is a huge John Mayer fan, just like me, a huge Ed Sheeran fan. Actually, we met over Instagram just playing guitar together and on Instagram lives and stuff and putting together. And he's just a really kind guy, a really funny guy. And it was fun. There's been lots of these topics like, MMA and hockey and then ones like the Alzheimer's Society that are just important information. And one of these other areas I want to get into is music and my favorite musical domains. And John Mayer is definitely one of those ones that, is a deep well that we went into, and we covered it pretty solidly, right? If you aren't a fan of John Mayer, listen to that episode and then try not to be a fan of him after. Even my best friend Chase, I don't think he listened to the episode. I think this is completely just coincidence, but he's just recently starting to get into John Mayer, which is such a gift to me, because now it's like my favorite artist, like the all time, the peak of the peak, and then my best friend, now he's starting to enjoy it too. It's just so much fun to watch him start to enjoy John Mayer like I enjoy it. It's great. Anywho's a woozle. 73 was another solo episode. Again, those are all cathartic. They'll all just whatever's going on in my life at that point. Like, I'm kind of what I'm doing here, but way more in depth for exactly what's happening in that moment. Episode 74 with Phil Troyer. He's an ultra marathon runner. He's done the death race multiple times. He's training in about a month. He's doing a 200 mile run for charity here in locally in GP. The VonDubCast is sponsoring a leg, and we're going to be following it the whole way. It's incredible what he's doing and why he's doing it, and the money's going to the Odyssey House, which we talk about on that podcast, and what a great organization that is for women's resources and all that. Also, and there's a great bear attack story in there where he talks about being on one of his runs and him and this lady that get into this tissy with a mama bear and a grizzly. Holy fuck, is it harrowing. It is a wild experience. If you just even want to, I should probably timestamp when in the podcast it was in case people just want to hear the bear story. But go search around. We talk about it for a good 10 minutes at least, if not half an hour or whatever. So just pop around and try and find it. It's probably a good chunk in there. And then episode 75, which is actually one of the most recent ones that I recorded. I just bumped it up in the time frame because of its saliency. Was actually one I did with a guy named Cole Delia. Well, I asked him at the start of the podcast how to pronounce it. Promptly forgot. Sorry, Cole. My bad. It was a really great conversation because clearly me and him had very different informational sources that we were pulling from, but both had a compassion for each other's ideas to at least give them the space. And I feel like we really showed that even when you're on really opposite sides of the spectrum, you can have a polite conversation about it, about COVID. The reason I put it out so fast was because the day we recorded that, the next day came out with that Brett Weinstein, which by now you've probably heard me talk about a million times. That Brett Weinstein episode came out about the vaccines and what's been going on and some of the fuck shit behind it, and has really changed my mind on a lot of this stuff from a real trusted source. I've been following Brett for 5 years and he's been right on the money with all this stuff. He's never led me astray. And if he's saying this stuff is dangerous, yeah, I believe it, right? So then I wanted to put this out, just get ahead of it as much as I can. And probably if that conversation was to happen today, it'd look a lot different. But even still with the information we had, I still think it's positive and will educate people a lot more than they were. That's sorry guys, I'm just drier than I've ever been. That's 75 episodes. That's 1 year. Like I said, tomorrow is going to be the year mark. And I have those 75, and then also past those 75, I have some recorded. So I also have one recorded with I kind of want to just catch you guys up because I have ones that are recorded in that year but not released. I almost want to give you guys a little bit of a preview out into the future of the start of this second year, which is actually part of the ones from the first year, but what's to come, and then some of the ones I have booked. So I have one with a girl named Sora. She's another girl from the Peterson Pals group. We did an amazing little interview. One of those ones I didn't know her other than the fact that she was part of that group, and I knew that we had that common thread in place. I didn't know who she was, what she was about, and we had an amazing conversation. Her voice is just melodic, and that one's probably coming out soon. Actually, that one might come out tomorrow with this episode. Now that I think about it. Also did one with Alex Robbins, who is the University of Toronto student that started that Peterson Pals group. She is just an amazing, amazing person. She's just did a condensed degree and has now got into law school and is finishing that. Like, she is spectacular. I can't wait for that episode to come out. You guys are going to be blown away by her. She is extremely, extremely smart. Then I have one recorded with Megan Chambers, who is another VP that was part of the LHSA's battle with the university. She was a VP finance back then, and now she's just finished law school and is starting her own law firm. And also she discusses her diagnosis with BPD, bipolar disorder, how that affects her workload and how her, non-neurotypicalness, or I don't know what the right terminology is. Sorry if I offended anyone with that one, but how that affects her ability to work within the framework of what's been set up in terms of, traditional law firms, in that it wasn't really matching up with what she wanted to see. And she recognized that she needed, if she wanted to have something that actually fit with what she needed, she was going to have to start her own. And that's what she did. And I think that is bold, and I support that kind of shit all the time. So me and Megan did that one, I think last weekend, maybe. Then did Thursday, did an episode with another Zoom episode with a guy named Nick Walker. His DJ or his stage name is Side Chick. I just posted about it on Instagram. This fucking kid, guys, so funny, so unique, so I don't even know what. So it turns out you guys got to listen to the episode. I'm just so excited about it. I'm just itching to let that one out of the bag. We talk about what goes into making music, like EDM, how he got there, his his journey with music and starting off with, more traditional sets. And I'm doing a terrible job describing it, but I'm so excited for you guys to meet this guy and to hear his music and to hear his mindset and to have him on many times in the future, because me and him already, just from that one interview, we got along great and we've been bullshitting ever since. And I think he's probably going to end up being one of my good friends going forward, which is exciting for this podcast. That's the other thing I was excited about with this podcast, is to have people on and start relationships and build friendships from there. So did one with him Thursday. Then Friday night had a girl named Isla come over and do an in-person interview here in GP. And she is cool. She is a welder. She runs an apothecary. She's a witch. She has all this, plant knowledge. She makes potions. Might not be up everybody's alley, but I fucking loved it. The spirituality, the mindset, the frameworks, the viewpoints. I loved every second of our conversation. It was so deep and so meaningful, and she's just so interesting to me. And a lot of the stuff, and I gave everything a chance in that one, and I tried to be open to it. And, a lot of it, I probably didn't push back as much as I could have, but I just love hearing people be into things, right? Like, at one point when I was doing the one with Nick with Side Chick, right? Like he was really getting into the nitty gritty of what goes into producing music and finding all the noises and the sounds and trying to switch them around and all this. And he was saying like, sorry if this is boring you. And in that moment I was like, bored. Like, I am fascinated. And I know nothing about making music, but just how into it he was, I was so engrossed. And I think that's what podcasts are. It doesn't matter the minutiae you get into. You might lose some people, but it's just fascinating to watch people that are that enraptured with something. And that was the same thing with Isla. Of hearing her talk to me about all these fucking weird things I have no real knowledge of, and just trying to find areas of my life that I can connect them to anchor them and find, common threads or whatever it is. Anywho, so that was Friday. Had an awesome episode with her. And then, I'm just trying to think of how much I want to tell about that Friday night. So yeah, I did that episode and then after it was so cool. And she was talking about in that episode some of the things she does, and one of them was traditional or like ritualistic smoking sessions, right? Sometimes with marijuana, sometimes with tobacco, but just about setting an intention. She's talking about, like people have all these ideas of what drugs are and they don't understand that it's all about intentionality and what you're using them for. And she was talking about like, you can smoke weed and just have fun one night or just enjoy it, or go to a party or go drink or do whatever you want, go to a bar, or you can smoke with an intention of trying to work on yourself or refresh, or there's so many things you can do. And I was thinking like, man, like that is such a cool idea. And then on the way out of the door, offered her a little something, like you can't come in and say that. I obviously got to smoke some. So we had a little smoking in thinking that, right. And it's also a Friday night. I wanted to join my night and hadn't done it in a while. So thinking, you know what, I'm going to try this and try and frame it. And I had just the thoughts I had that night and what I came to, and I was up till, I just had an amazing night. I was laying in bed that night and me and Alyssa were talking just about man, a year, 75 episodes, like 80 recorded, like this is pretty special, and gave myself that moment. We just, I'm almost getting emotional just talking about like to have that. I don't know. The reason I'm trying to talk because I don't know if I even have integrated it all enough to talk to you guys about it, because I don't even know if I understand all the moments I had, because it was just laying there, and then Alyssa went to sleep, and I just kept laying there thinking about what I accomplished and what I learned and what I've learned about myself, and was just trying to, just integrate all these things and just taking that quiet moment with myself to think about it and my ego. And I felt like I was just having realization after realization about myself and just all this deep meaning. And I was trying to think of like, I need to remember this because I want to bring this to you guys. I want to talk about this on this podcast, right? But I don't know how to articulate just about, for so long, my ego was so good in one facet, on the attack, right? Like when I want to weaponize my ego to get something done or to accomplish something, I'm so good at it. But then on the other side of it, on the defense, I I was so weak and I was so triggered, right? Like in so many of these ways, and to see what the podcast and what just these individual conversations and these, the way I was thinking about this year of what makes it different than any other years. Not only did I have all the day-to-day life struggles and all that you overcome and you work on yourself and you do better, but then also I had 80 moments, 80 deep experiences with people. Not 80 people, because obviously there was double ups in that, but probably at least 65 people, sometimes multiple times, I would have a 2 to 3 hour experience with, and our minds would touch in a way that I don't think many people probably get to experience at all. Like, I don't know, maybe this is a question I have to ask you guys that are listening, but when's the last time you talked to somebody for 2 hours with your phones off, not letting anything get in between it, right? Like, how often in a year do you get that experience? Because it is an experience, and I think it's meaningful, and I think we've lost that and we don't realize what we've lost. And it means a lot to me. And I want to make sure I do my best to articulate why it means so much to me, because the only reason that I can do this is because you guys listen to it and you guys show me when I'm on and off track of what's interesting to you and what you learn from and what you'd benefit from. And I'm so thankful because it's given me so much. This past year, I've learned so much about myself, so much about others. And I'm so happy with the growth that I've shown in myself over this last year. But it's not possible without everybody else, and without those people listening, and without those people that believe in me, and that send me those messages, and that tell me that they enjoy this and that they get something out of it, that relights that fire each and every time to make me want to go out and do it better and do it bigger and bring it forward. And I'm so thankful. And I'm also really excited for what it's going to be and what it can be in the future. Oh, I missed a huge piece of this. So I wanted to talk about this week and those interviews that I did just this week, right? The Thursday, Friday, and then I did one this morning that I haven't talked about yet. But one of the big things I did was, as you guys have probably heard, one of the biggest things I've struggled with throughout this year is balancing this podcast with work, and knowing that this is long-term what I want to do and where my heart is, but trying to balance that between the realities of life and what is required and what the requirements are of you. And I found I fell off that balance all the time this year. I was very unbalanced. My mental health was on a roller coaster. I was up and I was down, and I feel like I know what the changes need to be to make it better, but I was scared to enact some of them. And this week, I finally did. I told work that I'm not working Fridays. I'm taking Fridays for the podcast. And with that, because, if I'm only working 4 to 5 days, I only want to get paid over 4 or 5 days. So I'm also getting a 1/5 pay cut at work, which they didn't like. They said, no, you work hard enough. Don't do that. But I just said, no, this is what I want. And this is what I need. And this is what's important to me. And that was so impactful to me. And to know this week that Thursday's the end of the day and I get to work all Friday, and I had a list this long. So on Friday, I called the local MMA gym to try and get in there and try and bring more guests on and try and highlight their stories of the kids in the gym trying to chase a dream. Called some of the comedy places in Edmonton to try and get in with them, and just trying to take this to the next level. And that was very meaningful to actually have a noticeable step forward that is bringing that balance and moving my life towards where I want it to go. That was huge. And it meant a lot to me. And I wanted to share that with you guys, because the biggest thing holding me back from taking those steps is the support I have from you guys. And by me taking that step is showing that the support that I've gotten and the messages and all that coming together, when you amalgamate it all together, shows that you guys have enough faith in me that I feel comfortable taking a step, right? And then as I build this more and give you guys more to chew on, and you guys give me more that you're enjoying it, then I can take more steps and more steps. But at no point do I disconnect that from you and from the listener. And the reason is because I've been that listener, and I've enjoyed these podcasts so much and being part of their journeys and watching them grow. And I want you guys to be a part of that. So at the end of your opportunity, I want to take that chance to say thank you. And to let you guys know how much I value that, and that if you listen to this and you take a recommendation or listen to one of these people I talk about, that means so much to me. And thank you for, if you've listened to any of these episodes, or if you listen to this episode, thank you so much. If you told somebody about it, thank you so much. If you got something out of it, I don't know. I was going to say thank you, but that sounded odd saying thank you if you got something out of it. Just, I'm glad. I'm glad if you got something, because that's at the end of the day. Sure, this is a very selfish endeavor and I get a lot out of it, but at the end of the day, there is a real draw to doing something good with the world. And I hope that in one of those episodes, whether it's the one with Cody Twin or with David Akinnon or the Alzheimer's episode, I hope there's something in there that somebody got help with. And I know it has, because people have told me that it has, and I appreciate that. But I'm just holding on to the hope that there's some people out there that are really getting it. And I hope that I can continue to do that, and that in this next year, from, when we're doing this again next year, and it's June 21st of 2022, I have a whole new set of a podcast to go over with you guys, and new sets of learnings. And I just can't speak enough to what a life-changing year it's been throughout the pandemic. And even with all the negativity of the pandemic, I still think this is one of the best years I've ever had. And I completely attribute that to chasing a dream, and having that dream supported, because that's what makes it feel good. Chasing a dream and have it be shunned at every point is not a very fun experience, I would imagine. So thank you guys. I don't know if there's anything else I wanted to cover. I just kind of wanted to go through everything that I've been through this year, give a little bit of a background on some of these episodes, and just give you guys a little bit of a catch up, and also to document this for myself, so that in 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I can go back and see, when I'm reminiscing on what that first year was like, and how fish out of water it felt, I can go back and kind of see where I was in this moment, in this day. Oh, I didn't even cover it. Then to wrap it all out, I did an episode this morning with Ken Rutherford, who I talked about was one of the guys I did in Lloyd. Ken and Tanner were from the War on Weakness podcast, and it's Father's Day today, and we did an amazing podcast this morning on fatherhood and COVID and all these things, and just what we're in values, and we both cried, and it was deep, and it was just such a beautiful way to wrap up this year. It's such a beautiful way to really put a bow on everything I've learned and all the lessons that I've tried to put together from all that I've learned in these last couple episodes, just to try and put together. It was, I don't know. The world works in weird ways, and the universe has some plans, it seems. And I've just been very thankful for what those plans have unfurled, because I know that a lot of hard work has gone into it, but a lot of luck has gone into it, and a lot of weird coincidences have gone into it. And I want to say thankful to you guys listening, but also just to whoever it is, to the world, to the universe, for all that stuff. And just to let you and to let myself know of just, I'm thankful, and not to lose that thankfulness of just everything that's occurred, and hopefully everything that continues to occur and keeps on this track for many, many years. But yeah, I'm getting a little sappy at the end here. I probably should just wrap it up, but thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed that. I don't know, you might not get anything out of that. They might just be like, hey, why'd you just fucking read the descriptions for the episodes fucking over and over again? I don't know. I just felt like it's been a year. It was super impactful to me, and I wanted to just put some sort of stamp on it, wrap it all up in the bow, let you guys know, and give you guys a little bit of an outlook on the episodes that were recorded and yet to be released in the first year, but will be soon. And yeah. All right. Talk to you guys soon. And yeah, that's it. Love you. Bye. 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 Love you. Bye.